Okay, everybody who's familiar with the phrase, "you can't fight City Hall," raise your hand. Jim, I can't see anybody out there. What happened to that two-way camera you were going to put up? Well, welcome. It's Monday and it's Talkin' Racine. We're glad you're here. We being Mr. George Myers.
Good morning.
And Mr. Jim Spodek.
Good morning.
And Dr. Ken Yorgan, your host. And not always, but a lot of times we have fun with these. And this one strikes me as being a fun episode.
I just wanted to talk just real quickly and help.
Well, make it fast, George, because this is going to be an action-packed episode.
I've had this big question hanging over my head. How does someone get a job illicitly, a job they weren't supposed to get, and then when they get dismissed from the job because they weren't supposed to have it, you pay them off, like lots of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. How does that happen? I'm carrying this thing around with me, and then I find out our producer has done an investigation. He's got the answer.
Well, that's a big burden to carry around, George. So
It was.
I'm glad that you found some relief
like
there.
This, every once in a while. How can it be? Why do you spend the money to get rid of a guy you weren't supposed to be
there's
there?
a lot of money changing hands on over the course of this whole thing that you're talking about, this situation that you're talking about.
It's an amazing story, yes.
It is an amazing story, and just rough estimates. We're approaching probably, when you count the lawyers for both sides and this alleged buyout that's taking place in a settlement. What did they call it? A departure settlement?
Something like
that.
Separation.
Like that.
Separation pay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think we're approaching $500,000 of your tax dollars.
Yeah, probably.
And this is just one story.
And it starts with an anonymous letter.
Yeah,
I think that's what's very interesting. Without that letter, none of this happens.
Nothing happens, right?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this.
I want to just tell one thing though before we start. How this actually all of a sudden now is starting to come together in the appeals court. Sandy Weidner's open records case that's now at the appeals level. The city made a brief, I guess, is an argument toward why those emails should be sealed. Yeah. And in on number 11 of the emails, it talks about the Journal Times articles, and it talks about the alleged failed drug test draws concerns, and no news following closed door drug. So we backtracked from there, and that's where we're going to start the story. But this is how it initially started.
From this letter,
from this
article that was in the Journal Times.
Yeah, but they bring that up in the appeals. In this just recently, it was filed on the June 20th of 19. So that's where it starts. So now we backtrack from there and say, how is it that you're bringing up this alleged drug failure by an employee on a communication that was sealed by Judge Gaskergevich?
Well, it's just such crazy stuff. I mean, and this is the words directly from this brief that were written by the attorney for the city, the consulting attorney, or what? I guess that's what you call him.
Hired.
The circuit court correctly concluded that this email was protected by medical privilege. Well, now, wait a minute. The circuit court correctly concluded. What happened was this attorney and the attorney for Sandy Weidner each filed briefs. They did some research. They submit all of their information. And I think the judge errantly, and a lot of other people agree, I know you guys do, that the court decided to side with the attorney who was representing the city and to seal the case. And it was contended that there was federally protected personal health information that bore the risk of being exposed to the public, to you and I. That is absolute BS, because the HIPAA laws do not cover this kind of a situation at all. So the court incorrectly concluded that the information should be sealed, and now the attorney is coming back later on in the game and saying the court correctly concluded. Well, yeah. He's sucking up to the judge is what he's doing. Well, no, you were right, George, to agree with me. George, I mean Judge, not George. Yeah. And it's total BS. I mean, who is actually under the HIPAA laws? It's healthcare providers, it's healthcare institutions, It's subcontractors, like if you're a doctor and you hire somebody to process your claims, they're obligated under HIPAA. It's the Health Insurance or Health Information Protection and Portability Act. That's what HIPAA stands for. And it only applies to healthcare providers and contractors, like I just explained. It does not apply to the city. It does not apply to your employer. It's craziness for the attorney to make that contention and for the judge to sign off on it. It's just absolutely foolish.
And I think what's happening, and we can go back to it, George, from the very beginning, from that first letter, but I think what's happening now is the reason that this payoff is happening is because of this appeal is probably within the next 60, 90 days is going to come back. And my guess is that this appeal is going to, the appeals court's going to say, there's nothing in here that should be sealed. Yeah. And it's going to all come out of
this issue has been resolved.
Right.
The employee that is being discussed here has left his position. There's no need for any further investigation into this. No need for any further anything. Let's just cut it off. Let's cut it off clean.
Right. Well, it starts, though, with this anonymous letter. Now, that's what's mentioned in the next paragraph here. The letter lists the name of a city employee that an alderperson had made contemporaneously public, although anonymous.
I love that.
Yeah,
that's a letter.
Beautiful.
Statement about in regards to the city employee's medical information.
And that is not true.
The medical information was a failed drug test.
Right.
Right. Which the federal courts, by the way, and Jim he brought out the quote on it, says that those failed drug tests are not part of a private medical information.
No, not at all. They're not covered by the HIPAA.
This whole thing is false about it being private.
And the older person,
that's where it really started. If that anonymous letter hadn't been sent, we never would have found out about it. It would have been covered up the whole time, and there would be none of the rest of the story, including what you're talking about with the investigation of Sandy Weidner and the hundreds of thousands of dollars of payoff. None of that would be here. We would have nothing to talk about. So that's the thing
that's
where
the start.
We get our stories from these city screw-ups, and the more they try to cover it up, the more it's going to keep exploding on them. But anyway, that's the first step, and that step occurred at City Hall, and then there was a letter following that.
Right.
To lay off Sandy, to tell that alderperson, by the way, is Sandy Weidner, right?
Yeah.
That's
all right.
Yep.
And she, because she had gotten the letter, some other people got the letter.
They sent it to her anonymously, this failed drug test. She took it to the...
she talked to the Common Council.
Right, and said, listen, we're going to have to do something about this.
She assumed that it would be in a closed session.
Right.
And she correctly assumed that it should be in a closed session. But it was not. It was scheduled in an open session by City Attorney Scott Letney, and as a result of that, the Journal-Times was at this open session, and the thing was discussed. No names were brought up, but the issue was discussed, and then the Journal-Times prints an article about an alleged failed drug test by a city employee, and then, the scab starts to get lifted up around the edges. This is part of my up, and away scenario. You screw up, you cover up, it's time to go away. And Scott Letney is the guy that screwed up, and he's the guy that's responsible for the cover-up. And like I said, this could cost the taxpayers in a neighborhood of $500,000 by the time it's all over.
Well,
and the question is he worth it to keep him around? I don't think so.
Well, and that's the first step of our story here, of the Journal-Times article. A Racine alderman is raising concerns about the protocol followed in hiring city employees after receiving what appeared to be information showing a current city employee has failed their pre-employment drug test. That's Chapter 1, and then we go to Chapter 2, which I think you've got a letter that Sandy Weidner got saying, "Shut up."
Right. Now I'm going to play. I'm going to play this section
in no uncertain terms.
Okay. I'm going to play it.
Paul, the other thing that I think people need to be aware of and even be alarmed about, I've suspected for a long time that the city attorney was monitoring my city email account. And I'm an open book, so it doesn't bother me at all. Well, yesterday I got verification that he has done that. I had gotten an email letter from Rebecca Mason, who is now our municipal judge, regarding an issue, and that letter was to me, and it was in the form of email. I forwarded a copy of that email to someone who had asked me about it, which I have every right to do.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
There's the end of chapter 1, start of chapter 2. A letter comes saying,
Shut up.
shut up.
What was the name of that attorney?
The attorney that
They sent the
That
letter?
sent the letter, yeah.
Rebecca.
Rebecca Mason.
Remember Rebecca
Yeah.
Mason?
That's a
Shouldn't
that's a
she get
familiar
pub-
name.
pub office
Familiar name.
somehow?
Yeah, municipal. She was actually municipal judge at that time. So this week, so when
Municipal
we
judge.
go to the appeals and we find in the appeals, and then we go back to where Alderman Widener is talking
Well,
about.
that's a campaign thing. That's in October. That's way back in October.
That would have been
a ways
probably,
back.
yeah, that was a while back. But brings it up. And now, all of a sudden, after that, now, if we move on, she's going to talk about, well, now they want to take an ethics, get an ethics opinion on if this information should be released.
But wait. There's a little story in between there. And that is, she sent that letter to somebody. And that's what really caused the uproar.
Right.
She passed it along. In fact, she says in here that she's an open book.
Right.
And I think we should play that too.
Yeah.
But she passed it along, and there now it really begins to heat up.
Well, yesterday the city attorney brought to my attention that he was aware that on such and such a date that I forwarded XYZ email to such and such a person. And my position is, so what? I'm an open book. This is not private information in my email. So today we get an email that we're going to have an executive committee meeting to determine if the ethics board should investigate an official for providing official business that they received because they were an official, something to that effect.
Yep.
Wow, and that was the big
That's what kicked it off.
that's what really kicked it. That kicked it off, and now
See, the cover-up, because you know,
The cover-up was in
counterattack.
danger now. The
Right.
cover-up was in danger.
correct.
and they decided to counterattack at this point and
Yeah.
say, we're going to get her for having passed this information along.
But all she did was raise the question. All she did was that at that council meeting that I talked about, where the Journal-Times was present,
In the Journal Times.
all she did was say, we have a problem here. There has been apparently a violation of city policy that was concealed from the city council, and the city council, in turn, approved the hiring of an individual who should probably not have been hired. And we need to discuss this, because if somebody else comes along and has the same problem with a pre-employment drug test, and they're not hired, they can bring suit against the city because somebody
right.
else that failed was allowed in. And you guys hid this from us, and we passed it on, and now we've got a problem. Let's address this problem. And the response was, shut up.
That's
Shut
exactly
up.
right. That's exactly what it was. In other words, you described it perfectly. We need to be concerned about this because this could lead to a problem. And then she gets the letter from this lawyer, who later became a judge, to shut up. Basically what it was.
What it is, I talked a little bit about the firewall. That's the ice bucket. That's the bucket of ice water that they're trying to silence me. And I'm not trying to alarm anybody or, boo-hoo me. I just want you to know what kind of environment we have right now in City Hall and what needs to get fixed. That aldermen should not be under the threat of the administration monitoring their emails, giving them false information, denying them information.
That takes us to the start of chapter 4. In other words, they've decided they're going to do something about this person that brought this up and was not paying attention to the shut up letter. So we're going to take her to the ethics committee.
But
now it gets thick.
Oh, you can see the frustration on Sandy's face. I mean, she's like, they're doing this, and I really don't understand why, because they have no rationale for it. But if you hire a high-priced attorney, from out of town, somebody that charges an awful lot of money, so you have a big investment in it, that carries a lot lot So
now we're starting to spend some money.
Yeah.
Yep.
We better get some
anonymous letter, bring it up to say, hey, we need to look at this. Shut up. No, I'm not going to. I'm not shutting up. And okay, now money's coming into it. We're gonna go after.
Well,
it.
the item was never addressed. It just
Never addressed. No.
receive and file, put it away. That was a mistake. We're going to keep it a mistake because if you go back in there, you failed you failed a policy that should have been adhered to. They didn't. Now you're the city attorney who adhered to a faulty policy.
Well, he
or
violated
the policy.
Yeah.
Now,
City attorney's into it now too, because
Yes.
he's the one that
and it's to
let it go.
continue to cover up. Well, what are we going to do
Right.
with this cover up? Now we got somebody out there talking and saying, "Hey, this cover up,
Let's
should
send
be
her to
addressed."
the ethics committee. Let's go after her.
She's the problem.
Yeah, well, she really described it well there. I mean,
Well, they took her to the ethics committee then, and now it really starts to get thick because they set her up with some charges. They go into this executive committee meeting first, bringing all the aldermen in there, and it's a closed meeting, and then they give this PowerPoint presentation of a whole bunch of emails.
Correct.
All right. Well, that brings up the thing where that's the evidence against her.
Right.
So she says, "I want a copy of that. What you showed
I want
everybody."
the evidence. I
Right,
want
I want the evidence.
Which she's entitled to,
That's right.
except for the fact that it's an ethics board. It's not a legal arena. It's just really cheesy
All
to
it
not
did
give
was-
that evidence
Right.
to her.
All
I mean,
it is it's just trying to put a stop to all this. So let's
Yeah.
stop this. Let's threaten her with ethics violation. You know,
And show the emails that she's
Yeah.
passing around to people.
And
That was
scare the
thing.
rest of the
She's
alderpersons.
She's giving this to unworthy characters. I think Jim and I were two of them.
right.
We were mentioned.
I wasn't a part of that.
in the suit. Yeah. So the point is that this was the threat, and so she simply wanted a copy of it, and they said, "Oh no, you're not going to get a copy
Right.
of those things that we showed." And now it really starts to get
Right.
heavy.
Now, to her advantage, she says, "Oh no, I want a copy of this." And she could have, at most alderpersons or most people would have shut down. Then she files, "I want those," and what she filed was a mandamus. It's saying to force the court to say, "I want that open records." Well, that started the whole
Now we're
chain.
going to spend more money now.
Yeah.
We've got an open records request going, and now guess what? It's going nationwide.
Yeah.
Hey, I got a scenario for you guys. I mean, they're talking about this being privileged information. It should not be revealed. This is about a person's private health information. Why is it allowed when they got these mugshots in a newspaper? Some guy gets arrested for drugs. Why is that allowed to be in the newspaper? Name, what he's alleged to have done, so on and so forth. Isn't that private health
Well,
information?
they give they take a drug, they pull the blood and do a blood sample, and they give the amount of alcohol in the system.
Yeah, isn't that health information? I don't understand.
Yeah, there's no difference.
It certainly is. Yeah, the data is no different. Who got the data?
Right.
It was the cops versus your doctor.
Right.
But the point was, it's still medical information.
Yeah, but the point is that it's not covered under HIPAA, and neither is this.
That's
stuff.
right.
This was all a
that was
smoke
that was a similar
Yeah.
blood test given by the city. That was not a medical
Right.
exam or anything like that.
See, but they built this up, and then of course they pass it to the judge, and instead of the judge looking at this saying, "Gee, this doesn't look right,"
Yeah.
he automatically, "Well, we're going to seal this case." It's so dang bizarre.
Yeah.
It's building and building. Now the newspapers are getting into it because they're saying, wait a second, you're shutting off a source of information, and this is open records request, and the newspapers depend on it. And all of a sudden this judge has ruled it. So now newspapers are getting in saying that, wait a minute, we have a right to this information. But
It turns out that they do have a
they
right.
do have a right. And it goes even higher then, because now it's gotten so much attention that the open records people are what's the name of the group that puts out the awards?
Weidner sued the city for denying access to run-of-the-mill records, including her own emails. A Racine County judge agreed to the city's request to conduct the resulting open records litigation in secret. And when Weidner revealed information about the case, she was cited for contempt of court. We gave this year's No Friend of Openness Award, or NOPE, to the city of Racine, which wasted more than $75,000 of taxpayers' money fighting to keep these records hidden. We invited Racine City Attorney Scott Letany and Mayor Corey Mason to appear and explain themselves. but neither chose to do so. This is their award in the same shitty frame that we had from last year.
Open Records Council now, she gets nominated for being the whistleblower of the year.
She didn't just get nominated; she won.
She won.
Yeah. She was a
So now
strong winner.
we're into Madison and giving awards. That, and if you just go back, if it hadn't been for that anonymous letter in the build-up, Sandy never gets nominated. There's never
money
a charge
spent
against her.
I mean,
so all this huge story going on, nationwide thing. All
because
starting with a little anonymous letter
which
that
they
tried
should
to
have
cover
corrected
up.
right then and there.
Somebody decided to break the rules, and then decided that nobody should know about them breaking the rules. And when anonymously, and when I say anonymously, I'm not talking about Sandy Weidner, I'm talking about the person that anonymously sent her the letter.
Right.
When anonymously somebody exposes the breakage of the rules by the city attorney, and the problem becomes apparent to Alderman Weidner, and she wants to discuss it privately, but the city attorney did not schedule it for a closed session of the city council, dum-dum. This is what happens. Up and away.
All right, so we're now up to about chapter 8 here.
Yeah.
Where she's gotten an award for being a whistleblower.
But now you have to remember how far this goes. So now when she brings it up and says these emails should be public record, she talks to the Milwaukee Journal, and then they take her back to court. There's so much, this cover-up is so important to them that they file a contempt of court charges on her, and the judge goes along with it.
Yeah.
So this is how far this has gone now, and of course she has this appeal go into the appeals court saying, I think this was wrong, because the judge sealed the case with prejudice, meaning no one can look at it, it's over and done. Sorry, those public records will never be available to the public.
But they're coming.
They're coming.
Another little problem that's kind of sitting over a boiling all this time because of all this publicity and stuff is, what about this employee? What is he doing right now?
Right.
Say, he's still there, and all this stuff is bubbling up and saying he doesn't belong there. And so now we have to do something about this thing that we've been trying to cover up.
Now we got to deal with this. Now we actually have to deal with the problem.
Yeah, right.
Well, is the rumor that I heard correct? That this particular individual is leaving the employment of the city?
He is. And this is what, now it came down to, we got to get rid of the taint. Now this has got to go, because the cover-up, we can't have the cover-up laying here, because it may actually come out in the appeals court of what actually was going on, and if the employee is still here, it sure isn't going to look good, so let's
dissolve that relationship somehow or another. Then there's nothing.
So whatever we have to do to
0742-19, a communication from Mayor Mason requesting to meet with the executive committee to consider an employee's resignation agreement, which employee shall not be publicly named prior to the expiration of any revocation period existing under any relevant employment law. Recommendation that it be approved that we approve the negotiated resignation agreement.
Without objection, this will be placed on the consent agenda.
And this is where a whole bunch of more money comes into play, right?
This is where the payoff comes. This is
this is where this is where, what I told you at the beginning, where you have somebody gets the job illicitly, wasn't supposed to get, and then you get rid of them and you pay them to leave. Why? And then suddenly, after this, we say, oh, now we see why. We want them to leave quietly. We want them to leave quickly. Whatever the amount is, they're looking at 6 figures plus, to get rid of them is basically to protect, back here, the original cover-up, which is Rebecca Mason and Scott Letney. And then it made sense to me, because I thought, that's the only reason. You're not paying all this money just to get rid of a guy that doesn't belong there. There's more behind it.
Exactly. Well,
and that's the rest of the story.
We've heard that the Journal-Times has submitted a Freedom of Information request to get all of the information about this separation settlement, or whatever it is they're calling it. So,
because that's taxpayers' money.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That is not confidential money.
So, the Journal-Times needs a good story once in a while, because I know readership is down. So I would suggest that you monitor these guys. They might come out with a good story, and I hope it's confirmatory of everything that we've heard.
Yeah.
And I thank Jim for getting that question out of my head. You know, I'm going around and saying, how can that be? How can that be? And all of a sudden, it all makes sense.
Well, it's politics,
that's
George.
you're not paying.
You got to screw up here. We got to cover it up, and then we got to pay him off. Well, that's just politics. That's just good politics.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It's.
Yeah,
It
and
answered
you know, really, it doesn't come down to the employee. It doesn't come down to it or the payoff amount. It really doesn't matter. The whole fact is, in the beginning, the cover-up was in 2015 when it was brought up. It should have been handled. It should have never ever been hired, or if it was the policies or whatever, should have been adhered to in the beginning. That wasn't done.
I don't have a problem with the guy being hired. I know you guys don't either. You know, if it was handled in the right way. If they had gone to the city council and said, well, you know, I mean, this guy tested positive, but he's a good guy. We think he's highly qualified.
Well, there's a policy here, but if you got, here's my
tests.
thing. You got a guy over here that wanted to become work for the Parks Department, and he came up positive on a drug test. You think he's got a shot at it? No. He's out the door and gone. So what? It's over. This happens to be a different scenario, and why that was moved into that position and covered up, I guess we'll never find that answer.
And the other thing is when they decided to attack her with this ethics investigation and not let her get this information and throw it into an open records request case that goes up to the appellate court and then gets awards and stuff, and now what you're doing is you're just adding more and more fuel to this fire you're burning, this cover up thing, and it was stupid. If they at least left that out.
Yeah.
You know, don't go after her. Just you know.
Well, here's the other thing. The other aldermen
play it out more quietly.
They have no idea what's happening because you know now these newer aldermen are in there and they're looking at this like, well, yeah, I guess we shouldn't. They really are kind of lost in it. I mean, they're lost anyway, but they're really lost in this because now they're in there saying, well, you can't do this, can't do that, and they all look at her like, oh, you can't do any of this. This is all. But this is all information that the public has every right to know, and it's your tax dollars being spent. And that's when we talk about, oh, you watch what you say about information that's been released. Bull, it's all information that should be. And they've taken it to the degree that they are sealing open records. Yeah. I mean, that's how bizarre this one's got.
Well, and the emails, there was a new policy on emails. Any email you get from the city now has a warning down there that this is only for the recipient. And if you
let's
got
go
it
one step further,
accidentally,
George. Now, let's just go to the point where unfounded attacks. Now, we've talked about it with the new policy at City Hall where you need 250 signatures to get something on. What they're doing is just closing government down tighter and tighter in situations like this. Right. And the aldermen are just gladly going along with it. You need 250 signatures to get anything even heard from a citizen. They changed the policy of speaking because of unfounded attacks. I can remember an attack.
They call them personal attacks. I don't think a review of somebody's employment performance is a personal attack.
No.
You know, if you've screwed up something, I'm sorry, that's public knowledge, and the public has a right to know about it because they're paying your salary.
Within the last couple of years, have just tightening up. They're tightening up this information, and for situations like this is when the corruption just leaks. It'll run wild in there because people are human and people make mistakes and people are they have all those flaws.
Well, they're looking at a different. What we're saying, the resolution to this from starting with this anonymous letter. Of an employee having failed a test, we're saying keep it open, and handle it. They're saying no. The answer is to shut it down more, hide it more.
But
because
we're the ones
nobody knows about it.
We're the ones that know.
If nobody knows about it, then it's quiet too.
But that's a flaw. That's a flaw in your leadership. Because most leaders are going to say, okay, I'm gonna come back and we're going to have to deal with this, even unpleasant as it may be. We have to deal with it, and that's the way it should be handled. That's real leadership.
Well,
to cover it up is really cowardly.
And every tyranny that has ever existed requires immense amounts of secrecy. Yep. How many people are getting killed behind the scenes? What's happening? Yep. So this is very typical as you go into this corruption type thing and paying off and whatever else they're going on, is you have to shut things down. Otherwise, like this, there was probably just a little favoritism there in the failed drug test, and instead of sticking to the rules.
You know what I heard? I heard there's unrest down at City Hall.
Well,
there's people that don't like that this is happening.
Yeah.
People, employees down there are saying, what the heck is this? You hired some guy under those circumstances? And now,
You're
now he's
getting it from
leaving
the-
him, and you're paying him a
we're
bunch of
getting it
money
from
to
the
leave.
rank and file. We're getting a lot of rank
Well-
and file types that are asking questions like, this has been a little tempted here and there, but I mean, the fact is,
It's hard on an employee
It
to hide
is.
stuff.
Help is on the way.
And I just want to add something. I'll quote you here for just a minute.
Yeah.
You've heard the saying, "Truth will set you free."
Yeah.
And Ken's edition was that, but sometimes it's real uncomfortable at the beginning. So,
Yeah.
the best thing, the cleanest thing, is just let it all hang out. Expose it. But again, it's mighty uncomfortable when that happens. But once it's cleaned out,
you move
things
forward.
are a lot better then.
Yeah, a lot better.
Yeah, there's no reason to be fearful. You shouldn't have to be. That's a stressful environment to work in.
It is. It's
You know that you're not supposed to talk about certain things that go on behalf of the taxpayers. Come on, that is absolutely crazy. I mean, we feel for you guys that are working down there and that have to work under those conditions. So we're doing everything we can to loosen the bindings on government and make it more honest, open, and transparent. So anyway, thanks for being here. We'll be here next Monday. We hope you are too. Enjoy the 4th. Enjoy your week. Enjoy your life. Bye.